there a camera up there?
Yeah.
Look at that. I thought it was just a stand.
It's a what?
Little bitty one.
It's a little tiny camera.
It's a little what camera?
Yeah.
Hi everybody, I'm Gary, here with Midwest Model Railroad today. We're going to talk about water today. That's one thing you will always find in the outside world. You find trees, you find grass, you find people, you find roads, but you will find water too, whether it's a creek, a pond, a lake, even a dry riverbed. Now the main question is today, do you know what the difference between a river and a dry creek bed is? What?
Oh. Actually, I don't
How
know.
much water it's got.
Yep, basically water.
You don't
Dry
have
creek
water.
bed doesn't have water, the riverbed has plenty of water. So there's basically in all of these things, whether you're modeling the pond, the lake, the river, the dry creek bed, it's all going to follow the same basic steps. When you get towards the end, it's going to change a little bit. Now we're going to use several different products today. We're going to do our water, set it all up for here. We're not going to pour our water in here today because we have to let everything dry for about 24 hours. So I made this, so we got prepped that we'll pour our water into that today. Now what we have to do though is take a look around us. What part of the country, or the world for that matter, are we actually modeling in? Because that will actually affect what color of bed you put in, what color rocks you'll put in, what color you'll actually tint the water. Around here you're going to usually find kind of a murky green color to a murky yellow color in the water. If you went to Wisconsin per se, you would find it to be more of a brown color. And the reason is because the water that runs off from the forests and stuff into the stream depends on the type of tree there. And the pine needles and all that up in Wisconsin causes the water to be brown. So you take a look first, say, well, how do I find out? You can't go there and take pictures, look on Google. Google's a good place to look and you can get your camera pictures. Same way if you're doing your rocks, same way if you're doing your trees. You can always find the pictures on the internet. But we are going to do for around here, so we are going to use the murky water to tint our water when we get to that point. We're going to paint our creek bed first, and then once we paint it, we're going to place some boulders in, because typically you're going to have debris in the rivers. It could be dead trees, it could be logs, it could be trash, it could be any number of things. You might even find a boat stuck on a rock somewhere, or a dead cow laying out there that got through the last flood and drowned. So just whatever you want to put in it, do it. If I am actually putting something like a canoe or trees or stuff like that in, I pour my water in 2 layers. First layer I'll pour just the color, just the the creek bed stuff in the bottom of it, and then I'll pour a thin layer on top of it. Once that dries, I'll go back and I'll glue my canoe in place, I'll glue my branches in place, whatever else I want, and once that glue dries, I'll come back in and pour a second layer so it'll actually look like it's inside the water. Now when you do the rocks and stuff like that, some of your boulders are going to be completely submerged. That's the ones I always find when I go on canoe trips, the ones that are completely submerged. But you'll find ones coming up out of the water, and that's where your debris gets hung up on, so you usually find a bunch of it there. Like I said, we're not going to pour in here today. I just set this up today. I didn't want to come back and say, all right, we're going to have to do 2 pours on this, so come back next month or next. So we're not going to put any debris in this one. But like I said, when we first get started, we're going to paint our roadbed. Why do I keep saying roadbed? I guess I'm a train guy. We're going to paint our riverbed, and I'm using 2 colors. I am using what they call yellow silt. That will be, I'll cover the whole thing in yellow silt to start with. Then I'll come back in with a deep blue, which is not quite a navy, it's lighter than that, but that will represent more like the center channel where the water's deeper. Now I put both of these on wet, and the reason why, once this is on, I'll immediately start putting this on, and then I can fade in and blend it as it gets to the middle, where it'll be more of a solid blue to show that it's getting deeper in the middle. So outside of that, we're just going to get started. So I mean, it's a nice little paint, and you don't really have to worry too much about it. This has already got some rocks in here, so I'm going to try not to get it up on the rocks, because some of these rocks I still have to go back in whenever we do another rock class, and I always have some that I've put on before, so they're good and dry. So when I go to tint them, paint them, I don't have to say, okay, come back next month and we'll actually paint these because they're finally dry. So like I said, we're just going to stick this on here. River bottoms are never smooth. Need to pay a little closer attention because I got some on my rocks. Oh well. I just want a nice coat on here. See, anybody can do this just as long as they know how to be somewhat neat. Now the other thing, if you look over at the in-scale layout, where I put the water feature in it, the river, the waterfall, you will see that I also planted some rushes, cattails type stuff. You would do that in the first layer too, and then glue them in place, and then they will really get anchored in once you pour that second layer in and lock all that in with the realistic water, which is what we're going to use. There's multiple types of water you can use. I always liked using the realistic water. Some people use multitudes of other things. Woodland Scenics also has one called deep water. It's an epoxy mix, so you got 2 parts to mix with it, which that seems like too much work for me, so I like something that I only have to do it once. Although I do put 2 layers in there, but that's because I want to anchor stuff in it. I've never actually used the deep water. It comes in a clear and it comes in a murky, but I'm not sure how I would anchor that in, because you're pouring it deeper, so you don't need a second coat. So maybe you just anchor it to the bottom and make them a little bit longer so they stick up higher. If anybody can do this, come on up closer if you want to, just don't step in front of my camera, because we don't want to deprive the world of seeing my beautiful face. If the lens still hasn't cracked, that is. Here with my reach, try to get all around here. You think you can do this?
Yeah, probably.
You think so?
Yeah.
Well, after I get around these rocks, I'm going to let you try. What do you think of that?
Okay.
Get all this stuff back here in the back. That always reminds me of the story about a world-renowned expert in the field that was out on the tour circuit. And he had afraid of flying, so he always was driven everywhere. And his driver one day said, you know, I've heard this same lecture so many times, and the questions are always the same. I bet I could give that lecture. So they cooked up the plan and said, okay, we'll go in there and you'll do the lecture today. So they got up, they got all the way through the lecture, they got to the question part, answered most of the questions, and here it came. A question they'd never had before. So the driver, who was acting as a professor, thought for a minute and he said, sir, I have never heard such a stupid question in my life. And just to show you how stupid it is, I'm going to let my chauffeur answer it for you. See, you didn't think you'd get a scenery clinic and a side of dad jokes, did you?
Mm-hmm.
Such great to be such a multi-talented person, you know. All right, sir, you come up here. You take this in your hand. I'll hold this out here in the middle. Dip it in here. All right, and then just start painting all that white spot. I can see I'm going to have to come back sometime after this class before the next one, because I didn't notice before, but there's some seams in this styrofoam that we're painting that didn't get filled in. So I will have to fill that in and do some repainting, but that's all right. We're not going to try to pour water in it today anyway. See, not hard at all, is it?
Nope.
AJ, get that part that's dripping off the edge of the table. Over there. So sweep it up the part that's dripping. Yeah, pick that up. Right, before it drips
Thank
on
you,
the
sir.
floor. There you go.
Now, all of you, well, I'll take it back. Sometimes the younger kids kind of show up us older guys because, one, they're younger and more dexterous and flexible in their hand movements and whatnot than we are. And two, we're just old. All right, so we pretty much got our base coat put on here. A little thicker in a few places because I can see white sticking through. And like I said, it doesn't matter how smooth the foam is you're working with. It's riverbeds are not smooth. So close this one up. Now, one thing I failed to mention in the beginning, which I should have, if you've got rock faces or your shoreline or anything, you need to do two things. First, you need to make sure the foam is glued down solid. Two, once that's all dry, you need to come around with some glue, scenic cement, something, and go all around the edges to keep the liquid water from running under it and off the table. So keep those in mind too. So this is the blue. Like I told you, we're going to go towards the middle to simulate deeper water, and then we're just going to kind of blend it in. This is still wet. Hopefully it's still wet enough. Otherwise I might have to go over some more of it later after this. So first we're just going to put a good coat of blue right down the middle. Try not to drip it on everything. Almost dropped the bottle of paint. That wouldn't be good at all. And the paint we're using is Woodland Scenics Deep Blue. It's a water undercoat. So it's made specifically for their water systems. And they've got multiple colors that you can use. Okay, now that looks kind of odd, doesn't it? Let's see what we can do about that. We'll start right back here, and we'll just start blending it in. Get some more of that brown out through it. You've got to remember, water does strange things to land. Like in a curve like this, the water pushing against this rock is slowly going to erode it away. So you might end up getting deeper waters actually over here clear to the bank, just from that water seeping away. And then this would end up being a back eddy or something because the water's flowing this way. Starting to look a little better, isn't it? Well, I still ain't quite happy with it, so I'm going to very, very lightly go with some more with some murky. Try very lightly. So we get it to what we think. And you got to remember, this is going to be a rough, because once you pour the water on it, and it's got a murky tint to it, it's going to change a lot of the way it actually looks through the water. If you want to just take some small pieces of foam and maybe make you a little pond or something that you can experiment with, because once you get that water poured, you're done. You're not going to get any changes in it because it's going to be hard like a resin. Okay, so at this point is where I take some rocks, boulders if you will, and if you remember from our rock clinic, there'll be pieces of rock that we break off from the rock molds into small pieces, and we can use them for things like this. I didn't tint any of them, so I just got a bunch of white back there, so I'm not doing that today. But you always have bits and pieces where a rock mold broke, something like that. Use them, they're perfectly fine. For me, since I don't have any of those, I am going to use some Superior Scenics rock. This is, which one is this? Small boulders, and it was the color that I needed, so I used it. Dump up some here in my hand. I don't want to place a hole up there. Then I am going to take some scenic glue, and where I want some rock, and this is a little bit on the, got a scum across the top of it, but I think we're all right. And I'm just going to say, okay, I want some rock here. I'm going to put me some glue down there, and I'm going to work around different places where I think there'll be some rock. Put me some glue in there. And this, you don't have to worry about it if they're a little bit loose, because once you pour the water in there, they're not going to be loose anymore, that's for sure. Without causing a bunch of damage. And we'll just say we want some few right out here in the middle. And these rocks come in a myriad of sizes, small boulders, everything from stuff that kind of looks like granite. So we can just kind of start placing them around. Try to get some out here where you can actually see them. And remember the flow of the water. So I probably want my pointer end this way where the water's going to be reacting with it more. But you can put them, just build them up how you want them. You can put them side by side, making more of a, you can even put them all the way across, making a little levee type thing out of them. You can stack them on top of each other, make it look kind of like a rock slide that came down. But I try to place similar colored rocks together. That way, a little more realistic. I mean, you can get actually some similar colored but slightly different shades, which is what I've got here. We've got 3 different shades there, from the gray to the reds. And you just kind of place them where you want them. There's no right, there's no wrong. You got to remember, it's your railroad, it's your direct, it's yours. Do it to what makes you happy. Right, that one stuck to my finger and it fell off, and I'm not sure where it went, but it must be good. Since I can't see where it went, it must look natural, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, you've always got the rocks that I always find will be the ones that are submerged, so they're going to be a little bit flatter. Maybe like these. That I'm just going to, for now, push it right out here in the middle, which will actually end up being underwater. And you don't have to do a whole lot. You could also, if you want to, and you're only doing the one layer of water, you could actually go ahead if you want and plant your reeds, your weeds, whatever water growth is down there. There's a number of products you can get, or you can just get some of the longer static grass, put it in a little bundle, put some glue on the end of it, and then cut it to the length you want and just glue it right in place. I personally think we've about got enough rock in here. What do you guys think?
That's pretty good.
I think I got some glue over here that will put some right up the side a little bit. Make it look more like a rock fall. And you don't want to use the same size rock. You want to make sure it's different sizes because, hey, in the real world, rock isn't the same size. You can stay there if you want to, I guess. So I'm going to work various size rock in. Just pushing them in place into the glue that I put down there. So, then once I'm happy with the rock placement, we're going to, I'll just leave that little piece of shrub in there. We're going to take and put our riverbed in. Now this is typically going to be more on the shallow side because that's where the bottom's going to show. Once you get to the deeper side, it's going to be more murky and you're not going to see down there. So this I'm going to use, it's a Arizona Rock and Minerals. It's called Khabib Limestone, and yes, it's actually a ballast, but it makes a really good bed. And I will just take this, I will kind of sprinkle in place still while the paint's wet, that way it will start sticking. Like I said, I'll try to keep it on the silty colored side. I will put it in and around the rocks, get it all sprinkled in here on the piece we're actually going to pour water on tonight. This model is more of a cut, so it's got bluffs on both sides of it. The one we're going to actually pour water in tonight is a shallower, so it's got more of a, closer to a beach on both sides. Well, it might be a rocky beach, but it's closer to a beach. Helps to have a steady hand when you're doing this, especially if you're doing it with wet paint. If the paint's dry, you don't have to worry about it as much because you can always take a brush and brush it out of the places you don't want it. I'll hide part of that crack right there with this stuff. And if I get little piles of it too much, well, I'll show you what I'm going to do about that here in a little bit, because I'm going to take a brush and try to smooth it out just a little bit. Like anything you pour, this has a tendency to not want to pour, and then all come out in a clump. And if I cover over some of the blue, so be it, just to make my shoreline look a little more real. And like I say, I will take a brush. I'm not going to use either one of those because they got wet paint on. One of the reasons why I went to the store a little while ago and bought me some more brushes. Multiple reasons why, actually. Number one, for some reason all my brushes keep disappearing. So I was getting down to the point where I needed some brushes anyway because I was down to one. So I'll take another brush and I'll just kind of especially brush it in around the rocks, around the edges. Make sure it all gets back in there. Try to get it up under our rock ledges. If there's places for it to go under there, like right there's a place. But it's just a very, very light touch, so you're kind of moving the rock around, gravel, whatever you want to call it. The giant arm of the giant that's reaching down into this scene, it's knocking over shrubs. Whoever put them on there must not have glued them very tight. Oh yeah, that was me. Okay, now once we get that kind of looking like what we want it to, what do you think? Does that look good enough, guys? Mm-hmm. Alright, so then I'm going to take some scenic, not the cement, the scenic cement, not the scenic glue, and make sure it's all shaken up, and then just lightly spray this on all the stuff we just put down, and then once it dries it will actually have sealed all that stuff right into place. Now you've got to watch, especially if you're doing this with ground foam like you're doing your grasses, because when you spray it, if you spray too hard or too much, you'll end up moving, floating, whatever, the ground foam away, leaving brown patches like you see here and here, which is good or bad depending on how you want to look at it, because hey, you know what, in nature if you look at a field there's usually some brown spots in it, so you can look at that, kind of judge by it. You can go back and fill it in. When I do, I usually use, and don't worry if you get it out here, it's dries clear. You can tell it getting good and wet when it turns colors and actually puddles up some a little bit too. Then you know you've got enough on. And I'll cover my stones too. That'll give it a little more traction to stay in place. Okay, you see any places I might have missed? You're up there close and you probably have better eyes than me. Alright, so that's done. Now you're going to want to set all that aside and let it dry overnight, 24 hours, whatever. Don't get in a rush, because if you pour this stuff on it when it's wet, that's never going to dry. And then it's going to end up affecting that. So, I've done all this stuff. Once again, I used the, wherever I put the name of it, I said it somewhere.
Green paper.
Up here.
Ah, right there it is. Arizona Rock and Mineral Kaibib Limestone Ballast. And that's what all this around the edges is. And I used this Superior Scenics small boulders. I'm surprised it doesn't have a color on it, but anyway, it's the small boulders. You can get it in large, you can get it in small. You can also use Woodland Scenics Talus. Now, the reason I don't like using the Woodland Scenics ballast and stuff for this Who knows what the Woodland Scenics ballast stuff's made out of? It is ground walnut shells. So it has a tendency to float. So when I pour water on there, I don't want anything floating up to the top of it. I'll have enough problems with air bubbles. So I prefer something real rock. So Woodland Scenics Talus, it comes in various sizes for your boulders and stuff. The Superior Scenics or Arizona Rock and Mineral for the riverbeds. They're both made from natural rock. I used the Woodland Scenics paint to paint it. And that's pretty much it for that part of it. So we're just going to say let this dry. Once again, for this one, I used Woodland Scenics Deep Blue and Yellow Silt for water undercoat. I've got about 6 or so different colors. We're going to use the Murky Water tint. Now when we're tinting our water here in a little bit, you've got to pay real close attention, because a little of this will go a long way. And you still want to be able to see through it. You don't want it to look like, hey, we just had some major floods and this is all muddy. Which, granted, that's natural because we look at the Missouri River a lot and it's that exact same way. It's so muddy you can't see anything else in it. So, if you want that for your layout, that's fine. I don't want to see it in my layout. But that's my preference, and like I said, you got to remember, it's your railroad. So, anyway, I'm going to take a cup, I'm going to take a stir stick, and I am going to take the realistic water. I will pour it in the cup. I will mix 2 or 3 drops with something this small, probably only 2, and I'll stir it up real slow because I don't want any air bubbles in it. But before that, you can see where we've already done everything here. I put this together this morning. Just something made out of foam. Same procedures. I did the foam grass and some hired clump glass on the sides. I used the same materials in the rocks and the riverbeds, same paints. One thing you've got to do is you've got to put a dam on the edges. Now, I've never used Gorilla Glue tape, duct tape before. People says it works, so I'm going to take their word for it and try it. Me, if I was doing this at home where I might have carpet or something under me, I may not trust as much and put a line of glue right around the edges to help secure it. But we're going to see if this actually works today. Like I said, realistic water is the one that I prefer. It comes in 2 sizes. It comes in the all-gain terrain one, which is for people that are doing the little modules and whatnot, for war games and whatnot. And it comes in a bigger bottle too, which was their original size, which this will work fine for this one. I'd probably need the bigger bottle to do this one. So we'll just see how it goes. Like I said, I want to go very slowly with it.
It's not a 2-part epoxy, that's just
This
all
is
by itself.
one by itself.
And it hardens in how long?
It typically I let it sit for at least 24 hours before I do anything else with it. I'm sure it says on here somewhere, but that pretty and it's so small. Instructions: do not shake. I'm going to beat a game tack around water to prevent it from running out. Blah, blah, blah. Slowly to depth of 1/8 inch. Let cure until glass clear. Minimum 24 hours. So we're going to pour it very slowly. And try to guess how much I actually need. Now there are a little bit of forgiveness in it, because you can take a towel with alcohol in it and rub it down with it, and it will actually soften the surface for a short time, so you can work with it a little bit. But like I said, it's going to be soft and tacky. It's not going to be back to liquid form by any means. So like I said, this is just a liquid. We're only going to want to put in We're going to start with 2 drops and see what that looks like. I think I better shake this up first because it doesn't appear to be blended real well. It looks a little bit brighter. Let's just see what it does look like. Take my stick and push this in, and very slowly I'm going to mix that up until that tint disappears. It seems to be smoothed out over everything. Now the best way, if you do get bubbles in it after you pour it, which invariably you will get some, but if you get a fairly large amount, while it's drying, take a heat gun to it, and it'll bring the bubbles right up to the top and pop. Hopefully we won't have to do that tonight. Where I tend to get the bubbles in it is when I'm pouring it in the mold, because I'll tend to get it too high, and then it pours too quick, or something along those lines. But we're just going to take, and I go starting in the middle, and I'll just pour a line usually right down the middle. I'll just keep bringing, because I don't want to get poured too high, like around the rocks and stuff, because then it'll run up high on the rocks, and it'll still have a wet look when you're done with it, where it got higher, and that kind of looks a little on the unnatural side, so I don't try to pour directly on the rocks, but let the liquid water pour into it, realistic water. Now, one thing about realistic water is if you don't tint it at all, it will dry perfectly clear. Occasionally, over time, if you need to dust it off or something, because hey, it's a model railroad, it's usually in a basement or a place that doesn't have real good filtering capacity on their air. So you're going to get, hey, lo and behold, look, it's got dust on it. Well, the thing that you can do on that is, like I said, you can take some alcohol on a rag, very lightly run it across it. Hey, look at that, I almost used it all. So, we're done now. I can look down through here and I see a few little bubbles here. I can see more over here. Like I
There
said,
was a trout right across the bottom of the water in the deep part. There he goes again. You put little tiny trout in there before you pour it.
if I did that, I would probably pour a layer just a little bit thinner than this one. Like I said, put my boat in it. Maybe put a fisherman in the boat. Put a fish down in the bottom. I definitely put boulders. I think the layout over there, the N-scale one, has a couple of people on float trips. The one at home, I've got people on float trips. It goes through the canyon, where there's a canyon there, per se a canyon, but there's a flat, like a trail that's 20, 40 foot wide, and I got trail riders on it. You can put animals on it, you just hide them anywhere. It's what you're going to see in nature. Hey, you can put it on your layout. If you've got a vivid imagination, or you're doing psilocybin mushrooms or something like that, you might see stuff in nature that others don't see. I am planning, if you look at the N-scale layout, you'll see them over there. And I'm planning on putting a few around on my layout. There'll be some dinosaurs. The reason I'm going to put them on my layout is one of the guys that has helped me on it. He's really into dinosaurs. So one of my industries that's going to be on it is animatronic dinosaurs. So I'll put some dinosaurs around it. Now if I can figure out a way to get their heads to move or something like that, it'd really be cool, but I don't think I'm that smart. Yeah, I got a few more bubbles that I'd like. Hey Katie.
Pretty nice.
Let's go Can you go find me a T-pin, Nate?
What?
A T-pin, track pin. One of the things you can do, like I do when it's still,
Off the bubble.
well, I'll tend to drag them off to the side as much as I can. Some of them will pop in that, like in these big nests. And if they're off to the side, well, eventually I might get some more grass down on top of them, and they're not going to notice it. I got a cluster here, 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 and a few smaller ones here. Right up around the edge, they're showing some bubbles. But so far I'm happy with the Gorilla duct tape, because I don't see anything where it's leaking right offhand.
Oh, there's a little bit.
You're leaking on this one a little bit. I seen the bubbles trying to go this way, and I look down, and it's trying to escape.
Yeah, right there, huh? Well, that makes it actually easier as long as I take this off before it hardens and glues the thing into place, because all the bubbles are going to want to float down there. Yeah, there's quite a bit actually down there, all along there. Quick, dry, dry, dry. So yes, going back, I am going to make sure that I glue those into place also. Like I said, you can take a T-track pin or T-pin, just kind of drag those bubbles over off to the side a little bit. Like I said, some of them will break.
Oh, there's a lot of them.
Okay.
You just move them around to where you can't really notice them. Make all of those busted.
Will you turn it on for him, please?
It's easier to hide them when you go over here to the shallow area, because then they kind of blend in with the bottom. No matter how many times
Sleeve in. Don't get your sleeve in.
Yeah. Won't be the first shirt I've ruined. Yeah, I can actually see it flowing out of there.
If you got hot glue, you could hit it on the bottom between the foam and the tape to seal it.
Oh, wow.
I wondered about that because the foam's not real smooth on that edge for that tape to stick to. See if we can speed up the hardening of that a little bit. I'll go grab, hey Nate, can you go grab the heat gun? Should be over there on those shelves.
The what?
Heat gun, back as I think, over here in the tool shed. Lift that up and drag it that way so I can get back here to the plug. Where might be able to reach the floor. I think it's becoming looser as it goes on because I can see it pulling away. This will also help get rid of any of the other air bubbles. And if you want to, you can sit here and do this all night long till it hardens so you can get ripples in there. But there's an easier way to put ripples in it. That's hot. Cleaning up the duct tape might help too. Make it a little stickier. Definitely stickier. So anyway, I thought I'd try this way to dam it up tonight. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back to my old way, cutting a piece of styrene and gluing it on the end. I can see it starting to form a scum across the top. So. I do believe we got most of the air bubbles out. I still see a few that cover the surface once we started heating it up. But overall, I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah, the heat might be heating up the styrofoam first on the other side of the tape, and that wouldn't help you.
Nope. And I might come back, I wasn't planning on it, but I might come back and pour another layer on here, put some grass and stuff in here, just to make it look like a really good example to show people. And take a picture of this, show them. This is my success with Gorilla Glue duct tape. Don't recommend it. Because what I did, like on that layout over there, I cut me a piece of styrene, I put glue on it, glued it on there, didn't trust that, so I took some screws and screwed it on there too. And then once all that was set, I took on the inside and put some flex or hobby cack or something, I don't remember exactly what I used. And always
The Gorilla Glue tape did not hold too good. Now it's really breaking loose.
yeah.
And if you had two boards and a bar clamp, that you could.
Yeah, you know you could do that.
I've seen boards, but I didn't see bar clamps.
It's not the normal.
I had some clamps around here. They were big. They weren't bar clamps, but well, they were, but not the type of bar clamp I think.
You could put another tape on a little bit lower and wrap it underneath on the
You
bottom.
could do that.
I will as soon as we're ready.
But retain it at least for a while.
That is basically how you do it. Hopefully you'll have more luck with the duct tape than I did if you try it that way. Otherwise, I recommend cutting a piece of styrene, putting that against it, glue it in place, screw it in place, just something to really make it solid, and then pour to your heart's content. This one's not going to kill me since can somebody maybe right here and then lift it up out of that stuff so it's right there?
Hold it so it doesn't
No, I
move.
need somebody to hold it up here.
Lay down so it can wrap around. Ooh, it's solution. I don't want to go too far.
Yep. And there's a lot of, I don't know if that's going to help either. There's still a lot of stuff on the bottom.
It also helps to be on good level.
Yes. We'll see. If nothing else, it'll have a nice thin layer on it.
It looks good.
All right, any questions on it, or?
Oh, cool. I think that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you coming in. Just remember, we're open till, how late are we open tonight, Nate?
8.
Eight.
We still on the trains a little bit.
Sure.
So we'll come back tomorrow and see how this turned out. It gets hard.
I got an hour to run trains if you want.
Okay, go look at the layouts.
We're done.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming in.
Take
Stop by and
care.
seeing us.
Take